Have you ever helped a stranger, only to discover that your small act of kindness changed not only their life, but your own forever? What if the person sitting beside you, dressed in simple clothes and quietly struggling through a difficult moment, was one of the richest people in the world? And what if the only thing that truly mattered to them wasn't their fortune, but the kindness of a stranger? Today's story is about a single father who offered help when he had almost nothing to give, never imagining that the woman he helped was a billionaire CEO hiding from a life that had become painfully lonely. Stay with us until the end, because this story may change the way you look at kindness forever. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness, and subscribe to Kindness of Power for more heartwarming stories that inspire millions around the world. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? We love hearing from our wonderful community. Now, let's begin. Michael Carter was 36 years old and had learned the hard way that life doesn't always go according to plan. 5 years earlier, he had lost his wife, Emily, after a sudden illness that left him alone with their 4-year-old daughter, Sophie. Overnight, Michael became both mother and father, learning how to braid hair while making packed lunches before rushing to work every morning. He wasn't wealthy. In fact, far from it. Michael worked as a delivery driver in a small town outside Chicago. He rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment and spent most of his evenings helping Sophie with her homework or reading bedtime stories. Some months were harder than others. Unexpected bills often meant sacrificing little luxuries for himself so his daughter would never feel she was missing anything. Despite his struggles, there was one thing everyone in town knew about Michael. He never ignored someone in need. Kindness doesn't cost anything, he would often tell Sophie. And sometimes it's the only thing a person needs. Little did he know that those words would soon transform both of their lives forever. One rainy Tuesday evening, Michael had just finished his final delivery when his old pickup truck began making strange noises. Knowing he couldn't afford expensive repairs, he pulled into a small roadside cafe to wait for the rain to ease before driving home. The cafe was nearly empty. As he sat sipping his inexpensive coffee, his eyes wandered toward a woman sitting alone in the corner. She appeared to be in her early 40s, wearing a simple gray coat with no jewelry or expensive accessories. Her dark hair was slightly messy and she seemed exhausted, almost as though she hadn't slept in days. More importantly, she looked like she had been crying. The waitress approached her table and quietly spoke to her before walking away. Moments later, Michael noticed the woman checking her handbag repeatedly with growing embarrassment. She stood up and approached the cashier. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I seem to have left my wallet somewhere. Could I leave my phone as collateral and come back tomorrow?" The cafe manager shook his head impatiently. "I'm afraid we don't do that here, ma'am." Michael watched the uncomfortable exchange unfold. The woman wasn't asking for anything extravagant, just a simple meal and a cup of tea. Without hesitation, he stood up. "Excuse me?" Michael smiled warmly. "Please add her bill to mine." The woman immediately turned toward him. "Oh, no," she protested. "I couldn't possibly let you do that." "It's only dinner," Michael replied. "And everyone deserves to eat." The cafe manager nodded before processing the payment. The woman looked genuinely surprised. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You don't even know me," Michael chuckled. That's usually when kindness matters most. They returned to their tables, but after a few moments, Michael noticed she was still sitting alone. Something about her expression reminded him of the loneliness he'd carried after losing his wife. He invited her to join him. Over coffee, they began talking. Her name, she explained, was Sarah. She never mentioned her surname. Sarah told him she had been traveling for work and had recently gone through one of the most difficult periods of her life. She spoke carefully, avoiding details whenever conversations became too personal. What Michael didn't know was that Sarah Reynolds was the founder and CEO of one of the world's largest technology companies, a billionaire whose face regularly appeared in business magazines. For the past 3 weeks, she had been traveling anonymously across the country after discovering that many of the people closest to her only valued her wealth and influence, her recent engagement had collapsed after learning. Her fiancé was secretly planning to leverage her company shares for financial gain. Her board of directors constantly pressured her to prioritize profits over people. She had become surrounded by wealth, but starved of genuine human connection. That evening, she wasn't hiding from paparazzi. She was hiding from her own life. For the first time in years, someone had treated her like an ordinary person, and it felt strangely comforting. As their conversation continued, Michael received a video call from Sophie. "Daddy!" She beamed through the screen. "Did you remember tomorrow is Superhero Day at school?" Michael laughed. "Of course I did. Are you still making my cape?" she asked excitedly. Sarah smiled as she watched the interaction. "Absolutely," Michael replied. No superhero goes to school without a cape. After ending the call, Sarah couldn't help but ask about his daughter. Michael proudly shared stories about Sophie, how she loved drawing butterflies, how she believed her father could fix absolutely anything, and how becoming a single parent had taught him what unconditional love truly means. He never once complained about his struggles. Instead, he spoke with gratitude. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "life isn't about how much money you have. It's about who waits for you when you come home." Those words hit Sarah harder than she expected, because despite her billions, no one was waiting for her. The rain outside had finally stopped, but neither of them seemed eager to leave. That night, something extraordinary began, not a business deal or a financial transaction, but an unexpected friendship built entirely on kindness. Neither of them realized that destiny had quietly brought them together for a reason, and soon, Michael would discover that the woman he helped wasn't simply grateful for a dinner. She was about to make a decision that would change his life forever. The following morning, Michael woke up before sunrise, just as he did every day. He carefully cut pieces of red fabric he'd purchased from a discount store and began sewing Sophie's superhero cape by hand. It wasn't perfect. The stitching was slightly crooked, and the fabric wasn't the highest quality. But to Sophie, it would be priceless, because her father had made it with love. As he watched his daughter proudly twirl around their small living room wearing her cape before school, Michael smiled. Moments like these reminded him that even during life's hardest seasons, happiness could still be found in the smallest things. What he didn't know was that somewhere across town, Sarah Reynolds sat inside a luxury hotel suite thinking about the single father she had met the previous evening. For years, Sarah had attended exclusive charity galas where wealthy executives donated millions while photographers captured every smiling moment. Yet somehow, a man who struggled to pay his own bills had shown her more genuine kindness over one simple dinner than most people had shown her in an entire decade. She couldn't stop thinking about something Michael had said. Life isn't about how much money you have. It's about who waits for you when you come home. Those words echoed in her mind. For the first time in years, Sarah wondered whether success had cost her something far more valuable than money could ever replace. Curious to learn more about him, she asked her assistant to quietly verify a few details. What she discovered left her speechless. Michael wasn't pretending to be humble. He genuinely lived paycheck to paycheck. He volunteered at a local food bank twice a month. Every Christmas, despite having limited means, he anonymously purchased toys for children whose families were struggling financially. 3 years earlier, he had donated a portion of his emergency savings to help pay for surgery for a neighbor's child. No cameras, no social media posts, no recognition. He simply believed. Kindness was something people should do, not something they should advertise. Sarah found herself wiping away tears as she read the report. "This man has less than almost everyone I know," she whispered softly. "Yet he gives more than anyone I've ever met." Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued meeting Michael at the little roadside cafe. She never arrived in luxury vehicles or designer clothing. She simply showed up as Sarah. Michael never asked about her finances or career. He listened when she spoke about feeling disconnected from people. He encouraged her to take time for herself and reminded her that vulnerability wasn't weakness. One evening, Sarah asked him a question that had been weighing heavily on her heart. If you suddenly became incredibly wealthy, she asked. Smiling slightly, what would you do first? Michael laughed. Pay off my truck repairs, he joked. Then he became thoughtful. After that, I'd probably open a community center for single parents. Somewhere they could receive support, childcare assistance, and simply know they aren't alone. You wouldn't buy a mansion? No, he replied without hesitation. A bigger house doesn't automatically create a happier home. Sarah smiled quietly. The more she got to know Michael, the more she realized that kindness was the greatest wealth a person could ever possess. 1 month later, disaster struck. Michael received devastating news from his landlord. The apartment building had been sold, and all tenants were required to vacate within 60 days. He immediately began searching for affordable housing, but quickly realized rental prices had increased significantly. To make matters worse, his pickup truck finally broke down completely, requiring repairs that would cost more than he could afford. For the first time in years, Michael felt overwhelmed. That evening, Sarah noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. You seem troubled, she said gently. Michael hesitated before sharing everything that had happened. I'm sure we'll figure something out. He smiled. We always do. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Despite losing his home and transportation, he remained optimistic. Then she asked quietly, Would you ever accept help if someone offered it? Michael smiled warmly. Of course. Everyone needs help sometimes. But I'd want the chance to pay it forward one day. Those words became the final confirmation Sarah needed. The following Friday, Sarah invited Michael and Sophie to attend what she described as an appreciation event for employees at her company. Michael assumed she worked somewhere in middle management and happily agreed when they arrived. At one of the largest corporate headquarters in the city, Michael immediately felt out of place. Sophie held his hand tightly as they walked through the magnificent building. Daddy, she whispered, is Sarah secretly a princess? Michael laughed softly, something like that. Moments later, the event host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced enthusiastically, please welcome our founder and chief executive officer, Ms. Sarah Reynolds. The room erupted into applause. Michael stood frozen. The giant screens behind the stage displayed Sarah's photograph alongside headlines describing her as one of the world's youngest billionaire. Entrepreneurs, his jaw nearly dropped. Wait, he whispered. You're the CEO? Sarah smiled warmly as she approached him. And you're still the kindest man I've ever met. Tears filled Michael's eyes as he realized that for weeks, he had unknowingly become friends with one of the wealthiest women in the world. Sarah then addressed the audience. People often ask me how to recognize extraordinary individuals, she began. The answer is simple. Look for those who are kind when they believe no one important is watching. She shared the story of the rainy evening at the roadside cafe and how Michael had paid for her meal. Without knowing who she was, he helped a stranger expecting absolutely nothing in return. He reminded me that kindness remains humanity's greatest investment. The audience stood and applauded, but Sarah wasn't finished. Turning towards Michael, she continued. Several months ago, our foundation announced plans to launch a nationwide program supporting single parents. After hearing your dream of creating a community center, I've decided to make you its founding director. Michael was speechless. The foundation would provide funding, resources, and staff. Together, they would establish community centers across the country dedicated to helping struggling families. Sarah also revealed that she had purchased a beautiful home for Michael and Sophie, not as charity, but as an investment in someone who had already invested so much kindness into the world. Michael's eyes filled with tears. You don't owe me any of this, he said softly. Sarah smiled. Perhaps not, but kindness always creates ripples. You changed my life long before I changed yours. Months later, the first community center opened its doors. Hundreds of single parents received assistance, child care services, and emotional support. Sophie's favorite place quickly became the children's reading room, where she proudly told everyone that her father was a real-life superhero. Sarah remained one of the center's most active supporters and became an honorary member of Michael and Sophie's little family. Together, they proved something beautiful, that kindness has a way of finding its way back to us, often in ways we could never imagine. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Kindness of Power and join our growing family of kindness believers around the world. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to change someone's life, and perhaps your own. And remember, you never know who might be sitting beside you, waiting for a simple act of kindness to restore their faith in humanity. Because sometimes, the richest people in the world aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the biggest hearts.